Hey, welcome to another episode of Expedition Marriage. I am Chris with my lovely bride, Jamie, and we are glad that you would join us for this episode. And here's something you might not normally hear from relational experts, right? Marriage coaches. That if you're married, and especially if you have kids, you have some really great things to argue about.
Oh, that's so true. That is so true.
You have some great things to argue about. But you know what? One of the things that's not good to argue about is assumptions and misunderstandings. Because at best, they're a waste of time. And at worst, they're damaging and destructive to your marriage and to your connection.
Yeah, you can end up arguing about something that's not even an issue. And when we were putting this episode together about dangerous assumptions that kill connection, like, we mean it. They really do. Assumptions
absolutely.
can be very damaging. And here's why. I went ahead and looked up the definition so we could have a baseline of what we're talking about when we're talking about assumptions. And the definition of assumptions is a thing that is accepted as true or as certain to happen without proof. And where the danger is in that is when we accept something as true, we shut down the door, we close the door on any other possibilities.
Yeah.
And this is something like Scripture will even tell us that this is kind of foolishness. In Proverbs 18:13, it says to answer before listening, that is folly and shame.
Yeah.
And that's basically, if you're just going to respond without clarifying situations and just not get the full picture and just go based off of assumptions, that's foolishness.
Yeah.
It's foolishness.
Right.
And I mean, and this is one of those things, I do this a lot. Like, I don't even feel really qualified to be doing this episode because of so many assumptions I make. This is like a bit of a stronghold a little bit in my life, and I'm working on it all the time, and it happens frequently. I know what to do with it when it happens, but nonetheless it happens. And if you're someone who's prone to anxiety, which is what I was and still am, assumptions are a big contributor to that.
Yeah.
And it's because if you get something that you are worried about happening, because it's not just this may or may not happen. Anxiety-prone people are like, no, this is going to happen and I need to be prepared. And when you have that worry, you believe it is true, and you will act differently when you believe something is true.
Absolutely.
And it's like, there's no other options. There's not a good way that this could turn out. There's no way. I need to prepare for the worst case scenario. And you leave no room for there to be another option. And I will even do that in our relationship. And we're going to talk about several different things, several different assumptions we can make that will kill that connection and derail us. And honestly, I do a few of them, but I think you do some of them as well. But
look, 86% of arguments are over non-consequential issues, which means we're making assumptions, there's misunderstandings, there's mountains out of molehills. And a lot of times couples will say, you know what, we don't even know what started that argument, or we don't even know what we were arguing about. It's just had this really big argument that blew up into over nothing.
Right. And that's not just us. Those aren't our stats.
No.
Those are
80% of our arguments.
Yes.
I've been keeping a tally because love.
You would do that. You would so
love
do
keeps
that.
records of wrongs.
That's right. But it's common. So this is a kind of a hot topic in marriage. And I think it's one we're always going to have to be aware of and chase down because there's so much self-protection in assumptions. And so we're never going to stop. We're wired to do that. But lots of times we have to override our natural tendencies. And making assumptions can be a natural tendency, and it can be really dangerous and negatively impact your marriage.
Absolutely. And like you said, that was a good point, is to have to be aware. Because if once we're aware of something happening, then we need to be intentional about changing it up. But if we're not aware, good luck, right?
Right.
So start to have that awareness and then intentionally change things up. So we'll jump into this. So one of the assumptions, the dangerous assumptions, is assuming what your spouse means. So there's a couple of ways that this could go back and forth. Like, okay, well, you said this, and so now I'm going to assume that you mean for me to do this, and I didn't clarify, and flip it the other way where I say something and I just assume you know what I mean.
Right.
And
well, I mean, a simple thing, I just think like a simple thing is I'm going to ask you to do the dishes. To me, that may mean wash them, load them, dry them, put them away, like from start to finish. Do the laundry, wash them, fold them, put them away. To you, do the laundry, maybe I put them in the washer. And so
Yeah, they're washed.
those assumptions of that's what you mean when you tell me to do the laundry, what I assume you mean is that just get the laundry started.
Right. Well, or hey, the trash needs to be taken out. Okay. My assumption is when I get around to it.
No. No, the assumption is now. The trash needs to be taken out.
So that's why I get so confused when you're like wrapping it up in 30 seconds after you ask me.
And stomping it out the door.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, and so these are like, they seem very insignificant and silly, but you fought over them.
Oh, yeah, heck yeah.
These have been issues. And so kind of the point in that too is being aware, and so you can add some grace and know that, you know what, I assumed you knew what I meant when I told you to do the laundry, but here is what I meant.
Yeah, well, you'd even look getting personal. If you've been following us on Instagram, you may have seen that we were doing an irrigation project ourselves.
Oh my goodness. That irrigation project is doing us, honey. It's doing us. Yeah, IKEA, absolutely nothing on an irrigation project.
If you put together IKEA.
And we're surviving, we're doing it.
We are surviving, we're surviving. You'll see the finished product.
We're not done, so hang tight for
that. But go on Instagram. So challenges from that. So example, Jamie would be priming stuff with this purple stuff, and then you glue it the different parts together, and so I would cut and measure and so I'd have like a pile of stuff, and they're like, okay, purple this, meaning prime it, purple this, and then once that's dry, then glue this to this and this to that and that to this. Which
literally what he says to me.
Well, I know exactly, right? So my assumption is you know what it is too, because I pointed.
No, I don't speak PVC.
Yeah, exactly. But we do it in other ways too. Hey, can you, can you put that away? Sure. Where's it go? Over there.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of non-specific statements being made. That aside, there's also even different personality types that will get involved with this. There's a concrete or non-concrete or abstract. And so there's some that are like mean what they say and say what they mean. And then the non-concrete, they might not necessarily say what they mean. And trying to force those two together, if you don't know, right? The concrete person usually gets very upset with the non-concrete person because, well, you said this, but but that's not what I meant. Well, no, you said that, and so that's what you meant. And they're like, well, no, then you need to say what you mean because you're right. And so there's a lot of problems. And I've got this. There's one time we heard a speaker share an example of this. And it's so big, but it's true. It's just to give it an idea of how off this can be. So he comes home after work, and his wife's there, and he said, hey, do you want to go out to dinner? And his wife's like, no, that's okay. And so he goes into the bedroom, and he starts getting undressed, and she's like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm getting undressed. And she's like, well, I thought we were going out to dinner. And he's like, well, you said no. And she's like, well, that's not what I meant. Well, what did you mean? And she says, I meant I didn't know where I wanted to go.
Yeah. Easily confused by that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't know there's a difference, then that's an argument ready to happen.
Right. And what should happen from that point is, oh, okay, let me get dressed again. We'll go back out. Great. But what usually happens is, well, you told me that you didn't want to go. And now all of a sudden we're in this fight.
Yeah.
Over a misunderstanding based off of assumptions.
And then now you don't go out to dinner, even though you wanted to go out to dinner. It's like, well, forget it anyway.
Yeah.
And it's not so you don't get what you want. And neither of you don't get what you want.
Right.
Which is sad. And also another thing, definitions mean things. Right?
They sure do.
So when we're talking about something, sometimes we assume the other person understands the definition. They understand what you mean by this certain word, and vice versa. Well, you said this word, so I know you meant this. Well, you got to know, are we speaking the same language? You got to check out the definitions of those things, whether or not they match up and they line up. Because sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Yeah, because you have an idea of what you're asking for in your own head, but what your spouse, how they define that word or that thing you're asking for may be very different.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was just kind of thinking, like with fine.
Oh, yes. Yes, fine. If I ask him what I'm wearing, like, does this look good or whatever, does my hair look good, my makeup's good, and he's like, it's fine, that to me means redo it. Yeah. That fine to me is not good enough and whatever. What is fine to you?
Fine means great. Fine
no.
Means, yeah. If we were to put a number to it, fine is at least an 8.
No, fine to a woman getting ready is probably a 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. See,
So
but we're different. We could easily fight over that. And I believe
absolutely.
we have, if we're honest.
Probably have. Well, you said I only looked fine.
Yeah. And you're like, yes, I did.
Yes. Why are you getting changed? You look fine. Let's
Yeah.
go. Let's.
Yeah, so we don't want to get caught up in being thrown off because we've made assumptions about meanings of words and of what our spouse is intending there.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about another one. All right. Another assumption or dangerous assumption is assuming responsibilities. So assuming that the other one's going to do a certain thing, or that you're supposed to do a certain thing. So you were going to do that,
Yeah.
or you were going to pick up the kids.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll cause a lot of problems.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be, I assume, because since you got off work earlier and you're closer or you were already out, we're just going to assume that you're going to do this.
Right.
And
Well, yeah, it makes sense. You were already there. You were close to that.
Yeah.
So no one picks up the kids, or you both end up showing up there. And so then now you're both mad because you feel inconvenienced and your time was wasted and all sorts of things which is probably better than being in a panic.
Yeah, that's true.
There is that. But it still puts you in a bad place for fights to start easily.
That's right. And even with some of these assuming responsibilities, 80% of couples fight over chores. They're fighting over the chores. And a lot of those are not things and chores should never be written in stone because they should be changing when life changes and all of that. But they should be something that's well communicated because there's such a hot topic, a hot fight button in marriage. And we have assumptions there. I assume that you're going to pick up the things on the floor and not just walk over them. That is a big thing. And that's a common one.
Sure.
And like, I would assume you would get the kids because you are right there. But different chores and things like that, if we're not communicating whose job we think it is to do this or who should be doing this, and we're just leaving them as assumptions instead of communicating different responsibilities. And this is kind of more communicating your expectations.
Yeah.
And it's about confirming those expectations. Here's the list of the things I need you to do, instead of just expecting, because we have different areas of focus.
Absolutely.
I think many men can walk over toys and walk over clothes on the floor, and it's not even on your radar. You're not going, oh, I'm going to show my wife. I'm not picking that up. You're just like, I don't even see it. I'm not bothered by that. I'm greatly bothered by clutter. I can't stand clutter. I will declare the house a mess if there's 5 things on a counter. It's
True story.
yes, it is a true story. And so I am bad about that, but it's my meaning of what clutter is. So it goes back to the first one, but it's also me needing to clarify, hey, I need you to help with this specifically, instead of just assume you'll take it on as a responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, you just need to be proactive.
Yes, that's what it is.
I don't want to belittle this, but spend 10 seconds, maybe 20 seconds, just to double check. Right? Because that's better return on investment than the hours that we'll sometimes waste on arguing over these things, where we just work smarter and harder.
And that point right there, it is so ridiculous how many things, and I can take this personally too, that I say, I don't have time for that, or I wish I had more time to do this. I don't have time. But I've never turned down an hour argument to go, you know what, I don't have time for this right now. No, most of us, if we get caught in that fight, that barrel is rolling down the hill and we're going with it. We're not pausing to say, I don't really have time for this.
Honey, it feels like we're getting
But
into
we'll
an
say,
argument, and I don't
Yes.
think we have time for this. Can we schedule this for later?
Right, nobody's
Nobody
doing that.
does that.
But we'll sit there and say, I don't have time to have this discussion.
Right.
But we will make time to fight over it for 5 times longer.
No, absolutely. And you know what? And if ever you're thinking that it goes without saying, that's probably a time when you need to be clarifying.
Yes.
That's probably a time when you need to be double checking. And if you're on the receiving end of that, because look, I know that there's some husbands are out there going, you're always double checking me. You don't trust me and stuff like that. Look, to you all, what I'm going to just suggest, the response is, thank you.
Yeah.
Just say thank you, because your spouse is concerned of this getting done. You're concerned with it getting done. You both are on the same page.
It's an opportunity for reassurance.
You're just, reassuring, and you have the same goal. If I'm driving and Jamie's like saying, hey, look, don't forget that we need to turn here. I just turn to her and say thank you.
Yeah. Instead of I know.
Well, because let's be honest, sometimes I may have forgotten, but even if I didn't forget, she just is looking out for us. She's got our best interest in mind. That actually leads into the next dangerous assumption.
It does. It does.
It definitely leads to where the danger of assuming the other's intentions.
I am guilty as charged with this one. This is a big one for me. Is I will label and I will know not only what you're doing, but I know why you're doing it. And this is like going back, and I would swear, raising 3 little girls, and when everybody's toddlers, elementary age, the house, there's lots of toys, lots of homework, lots of stuff going on. And when he wouldn't help me, or if I felt he was putting everything on me because he didn't pick up the things that he stepped over, my automatic assumption was, you don't care about me. You don't appreciate anything that I'm doing. And this would be a round and round fight that we would have.
Sure.
And I would assign the intentions of you missing to pick stuff up or you not helping with a certain thing without asking, mind you,
right.
without asking, meant that you didn't care and that you didn't appreciate me.
Well, it falls into the definition of assumptions.
Yes. And
Right.
if I accept that as truth, we've got a problem in our marriage.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Not only unnecessary argument, but now we have feelings that are going to be held against each other. We're having distancing. That connection is going to be pushed away because if I'm not for you, then I'm against you.
Right. And that's the thing. And I mentioned this earlier is we tend not to assume the better. And that's something
true.
we try to teach couples.
True.
Assume that your spouse has good intentions.
Yeah.
Assume that they're not wanting to get you lost on the road, wanting to forget things, wanting to not help you. Assume that they have good intentions and that they're just different than you, or that they've forgotten something, or that they just think differently than you do or define things differently.
Right.
And so we're not usually going to assume good things.
No,
and
that's
so
true.
when I see you stepping over those toys and I feel like the house is a wreck, my assumption is usually you don't care, and instead of you don't even see it because that stuff's not on your radar because you've lived in an entirely different world than I have today.
Sure.
You haven't been looking at
yeah.
those toys all
Good
day
point.
long. You've had a different reality today. You're coming home, they're there. You don't mind because you've only dealt with them for 5 minutes.
Right.
And my assumption is not, oh, he doesn't see it, so let me just ask. My assumption naturally is self-protective. And that's the hook of assumptions.
Yeah.
Is there ways to protect us? There are ways for us to get ahead and stay safe in things.
Right. Well, absolutely. We've shared this before. Whenever there's holes, we'll tend to fill them with negative.
Yeah.
So when there's
Yeah.
a hole of uncertainty or not clarification or it's not put in there, we don't know why that this is being done or why that person, we tend to fill it with negative because we're self-protective by nature. We got to keep ourselves safe, it's like you're saying.
Yeah.
So those are the things. We'll put that in there because I'm bracing myself for the worst case scenario. I don't have to brace myself for the best case scenario. So we do have a non-dangerous assumption is to assume that the other person's heart is good.
Yeah.
Even if what they're doing might not become the best, their heart, this person that you married, that you're sharing your life with, assume their heart's good till you've proven otherwise.
Yeah. And I think like common things for men, I think it's common for wives, and I won't speak for all of them, to feel like some assumptions we have is you don't appreciate me and you don't care. But I think a common assumption men have or tend to deal with is we're doing things, their wives are doing things because they believe they're inadequate. And so in the car, when it's like, did you see this? Or there's a red light coming up, or are you going to turn here? Or are you sure you know where you're going?
Right.
That reassurance is not our asking for reassurance can often be received as, what, do I not know how to drive? As
It's a
if I
slight.
would endanger my family, like I would let my kids do something dangerous, like I would take us in the wrong direction. Whatever it is, it's that our need for reassurance sometimes gets received and assumed as a disbelief in you or that we believe you're inadequate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's definitely slight. Or even just going a little further, because a lot of men, but even just more people who tend to be more on the passive side, whenever their other spouse, like in our house, we call it passion.
Their other spouse.
Their other spouse.
That's what they have a few.
There you go. When their spouse, in our house we call it passion. So when they become a little passionate, well, you're upset at me.
Yes.
not at a situation, or not even something completely different. And you might not even
Yeah.
really be upset. You might be like on the scale of 0 to 10, you might only be at a 1, right? But you know what?
But it comes out bigger.
Yeah, I'm assuming that you're mad, and you're mad at me, and I blew it somehow, and it's my fault, and now I'm going to get defensive, and I'm going to get loaded for bear because I've got to protect myself from where I'm at.
Because you're responding to something you believe is true. And again, that's the danger in all of this, is when we believe something is true, we will react to that. But the problem is the things we believe and the things we assume aren't always true.
No.
And that's why we've got to fact check them. We've got to do our research. We've got to ask the questions. We've got to confirm, and we've got to clarify with one another that those are the things that is actually happening and that's actually being said.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So let's look at another one. So another assumption, dangerous assumption, is assuming the other person's preferences.
Yeah.
Now, look, please don't hear what we're not saying. It is good to learn your spouse. It's good to learn that they're
Things they like.
how we can positively influence them. So, and there's even a story that we shared, the husband who would keep notes of different places that they went, for that his wife would order her favorite coffees and her favorite foods and things like that. So all those things are great. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to assume, first off, oh, well, they like that because I like this, or they'll want this, and so we kind of run over the other person by doing that. And also, on the same hand, we also don't want to assume that our likes don't ever change.
Right. Our preferences do change, and we have different needs in different time. If you're raising little kids at home, you may have a preference for quiet time. I need to go out once a week by myself with my girlfriends, or just have alone time. I need a bath. But when life is less demanding, those may not be your needs anymore. And so we don't want to be just assuming that how my spouse is now is how they're going to be forever.
Right.
You know, we had a funny story, and a kind of funny, not so funny to me story. You know, I don't know what made me believe. I think I had made something. This was early on in our marriage. I made something like blueberry pancakes or something like that.
Something like that.
And Chris loved them, thought they were great. Well, what I assumed
Big
is
fan of blueberry pancakes.
yeah, what I assumed was that blueberries were his favorite. I mean, you can see how I got there. New wife, I was excited. He liked the blueberries. So everything, I'm buying blueberry muffins, I'm buying blueberry granola bars, blueberry yogurt, everything. And years into our marriage, he's like, you know, you don't have to get just blueberries. And I said, but they're your favorite. And he's like, no, they're not. And I have not bought a blueberry thing since.
Yeah, I don't.
Because I overcorrected to that. You know, because again, that's
27 years later, you know.
Yes, because the assumption that's the result of another assumption. Just because blueberries aren't his favorite, what do I hear now? He hates them. He hates blueberries, where that is not true either. And so simple, silly little things can actually become big issues. And so you do want to clarify, what are you liking now in this stage of life? And what are the things that are fun for you, that are restful for you? What are the things you consider help? What I considered help when I had little kids is very different from what I consider help now.
Sure. Right. And I like that point that you said, because it might be like, okay, well, you want quiet time, you want quiet time, you want quiet time. Well, you might be at a point where you don't want quiet time, and I keep giving you quiet time. Well, it jumps back to assuming intentions. Why is he so distant from me? Why is he not
you don't want to
engaged
spend
me?
any time with me anymore.
Yeah. Oh, I just thought you still wanted quiet time.
Yeah. Yeah. So check those preferences and communicate and get those clear, because it seems insignificant, but they're not. They're not. And then the last one, this is a big one too, is you don't want to assume what your spouse knows.
No. Or should know.
Right, what they should. Yeah.
You know, like, and as far as this idea of should, if you haven't heard this before, one of the definitions that you could throw out is that should is could covered by shame.
Yeah.
And I really like that. So, you know, but look, there's no such thing as common sense. And that might blow someone's world up. And I apologize for that. But look, I want to be truthful for you lovingly. There's no such thing as common sense. It's experiential sense. So, so if it's the people who go through similar experiences, then they have this kind of knowledge that they're able
in common.
In common. But, and I'd like to use the analogy of a farmer. It's a gross generalization, I understand. But taking a farmer in Idaho and just kind of like going, okay, well, look at the potatoes, go see which ones are ready to harvest and get those and harvest those, right, and stuff like that. And so they know what to do. It's common sense. Well, if you take that Idahoan, is that well, anyway, if you take that same farmer from Idaho and you drop them over in Hawaii and then go, okay, we need you to go ahead and work in the pineapple fields. Right? Get a gross generalization. I can understand that. But it's like, well, which ones do I get? What's common sense?
Right. Yeah, you should know. How do you not
You're
know
a
this?
farmer. How do you not know, which ones are ripe and which one, and how to harvest and all that stuff like that. And there's not common sense. It's what have we gone through these shared experiences. So because there's no mind reading.
No.
Right? There's no mind reading. We've got to communicate. We've got to go ahead and make sure that the other person's on the same page. As going back to the example of fine, because fine does not equal fine.
No.
That does not equal fine. So that's where it's this communication or over communicating is really important. And again, it might seem like, well, it's too much. Well, we're talking 10 to 20 seconds.
Right.
10 to 20 seconds to be able to save hours. And so, you know what? Let's work smarter, not harder. And let's not, have these 1 to 2 hour arguments that are damaging to our relationship when we really have better things to argue about if we're going to argue.
Right, things that actually can lead to resolution. And it's our nature to make assumptions, and it's because we believe that's what helps us stay safe, and it helps us stay ahead of the game to protect ourselves. But what we really want to do is live our lives based off of what's true, not just what we believe to be true.
Absolutely.
So in your marriage, you always want to be sure to be clear and to clarify if you want to
Enjoy the journey.